The pain of silence and the truth behind it, you don't always notice it right away. One day, you're included, surrounded, a part of everything. Your phone lights up, group chats are alive, the world feels full, and then, without warning, it gets quiet. The messages slow down, then stop. Invitations dry up. You're no longer the center of the room, not even the side character. You're the shadow no one acknowledges. And the strangest part, nobody announces it. There's no dramatic goodbye. People just stop showing up. At first, you make excuses. They're busy, I'm busy, life happens. You convince yourself it's temporary, that the silence is just a passing phase. But in the pit of your stomach, you know it's different. Something shifted, and eventually the realization lands heavy. You've been left behind, and it hurts. It hurts more than you expected because you were there for them. You showed up, you listened, you gave, and when it was your turn to need support, the room went silent. Suddenly you're face to face with isolation, and it wasn't part of your plan. Let's be honest, being left out feels like rejection, like the world voted you off the island. And as the silence deepens, it doesn't just stay outside, it creeps inside you. You start asking questions. Did I do something wrong? Am I too much? Did I even matter? The silence plays tricks, convincing you that you're the problem. But here's the truth. This isn't punishment. This is transition. The shift no one talks about. What no one tells you is that silence is often the doorway to your next chapter. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're unworthy. It means you're evolving, and your evolution no longer fits inside the old containers. Think of it like this. Your old relationships, your old crowd, your old version of self, they were designed for a smaller you. And the moment you started asking bigger questions, setting firmer boundaries, choosing peace over performance, those relationships didn't know what to do with you anymore. Most people don't confront it directly. They don't sit you down and say, "You've changed." They just fade. They don't explain. They don't push back. They just stop inviting you. And you're left in the silence wondering what happened. But that silence, it's not empty. It's sacred. This is realignment, not abandonment. It's life quietly pulling you away from the wrong crowd so you can hear your own voice for once. The story isn't over. It's just quieter now because something powerful is being written beneath the surface. Alone versus lonely. Here's the distinction that matters. Being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. Being alone is a state. Being lonely is a story. If you tell yourself the story that the silence means you're unwanted, you'll feel abandoned. But if you shift the story, you'll realize you weren't rejected. You were redirected. You were moved onto a path where fewer people walk, so you can become someone fewer people ever become. And yes, it hurts. You're allowed to feel that. You're allowed to grieve the people who didn't stay. You're allowed to miss the version of you who once needed them. It's okay to sit in the quiet and admit you're scared. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. But pain isn't permanent. And just because you're walking alone right now doesn't mean you will be alone forever. This chapter, this silence, is where the real you is born. Hearing your own voice in the absence of constant chatter, something strange happens. You start hearing a different voice. Not theirs, yours. And not the filtered version of yourself you used to present to keep the peace, but the raw one, the unedited one, the one that says, "You've been living under other people's expectations for too long." It's time to meet yourself. That's the beginning of alignment. For the first time, your decisions stop being about approval and start being about authenticity. You no longer shrink to fit a space because there's no one left to perform for. Instead, you start asking real questions. What do I believe? What do I want to build? What kind of life actually feels like mine? This is the lone wolf path. Not a brand, not an aesthetic, but a necessity. It's the beginning of becoming whole without needing to be completed by anyone else's applause. Why this hurts so much, psychologists call this stage social pruning. When you grow, your circle shifts. It's natural, but it feels brutal because it exposes every old wound you've been carrying. Childhood fears of being left out, attachment styles that crave belonging, ego patterns that depend on validation. And when all of that gets triggered, your instinct is to run back to the crowd, to fill the silence with noise. But here's the risk. If you go back too soon, you'll shrink again. You'll contort yourself into the old shape just to fit in. And that's not growth, that's regression. A different perspective on silence. So what if the silence isn't the enemy? What if it's the test? Think of it like weight training. Resistance isn't punishment, it's how you get stronger. The silence is the resistance. It's life asking, will you keep shrinking back into the old pattern, or will you let this loneliness forge you into something deeper? This isn't about proving people wrong. It's not about flexing your solitude like a badge. It's about finding your rhythm, waking up and choosing integrity over comfort, honoring your values even when it costs you company. That's not lonely, that's liberating. Practical drill, sitting with the silence. Here's something simple to practice this week. Every day, take 10 minutes to sit in silence. No phone, no music, no distraction, just you and your thoughts. At first, it'll feel unbearable. Your mind will race, searching for stimulation. But if you stay with it, something powerful happens. You begin to notice your cravings. You begin to see the exact moments when you want to reach for validation, when you want to distract yourself from being with yourself. This awareness is the first step to freedom, because once you see the pattern, you can start rewriting it. Let me leave you with this. The silence isn't empty, it's sacred, it's not erasing you, it's refining you. Most people never get here. They keep returning to old crowds, old identities, old patterns, because sitting with themselves feels unbearable. But you stayed. You chose to sit in the quiet instead of filling it with noise. You chose depth over distraction. And that choice alone proves you're not behind, you're ahead. So if you're walking alone right now, wondering why it feels so heavy, remember, this is the season where the weak walk away and the strong are forged. Stay with it, keep walking. The silence isn't punishment, it's preparation. Walking the lone wolf path, from stripped down to rebuilding. When the noise of the old world fades, you're left with yourself. No masks, no distractions, no constant validation. And honestly, it feels raw. It feels like you've been stripped bare. You start noticing all the patterns you used to cover up, the times you gave too much, the moments you stayed too long in places you should have left, the ways you betrayed yourself just to belong. It's uncomfortable, almost like holding up a mirror you've avoided for years. But here's the paradox. That discomfort is the gift. Because when everything unnecessary is gone, you finally see what's real. Facing the shadow, Carl Jung, the psychologist, called this process individuation. It's when you stop running from the hidden parts of yourself and start integrating them. You face your shadow, the insecurities, the cravings, the places where you bent just to be accepted. On the lone wolf path, that's your initiation. You sit in the silence long enough to admit, yes, I wanted approval. Yes, I shrank myself. Yes, I ignored red flags to feel loved. But here's where the power lies. Once you name it, it loses its grip. You don't have to carry it like shame anymore. You carry it like wisdom. Small rituals, big shifts. This rebuilding isn't traumatic. It doesn't look like a glow-up montage. It looks like small, almost invisible choices that slowly rewire your foundation. You start waking up earlier, not because it's trendy, but because you need peace before the world intrudes. You take care of your body, not for applause, but because it's the vessel carrying you through the battle. You write not to perform, but to listen, to hear your own voice clearly. And day by day, those little rituals stack. They aren't aesthetic, they're alignment, redefining boundaries. One of the biggest lessons on this path is energy. You start realizing not everyone deserves access to you. Not everyone has earned the right to hear your story, to sit at your table, to occupy your mind. Before, you let people in just to feel less alone. Now, you'd rather walk alone in peace than with people who drain your soul. This is where boundaries change. They stop being acts of defense. They become acts of self-respect. And because of that, you stop over-explaining them. You simply live them. The people who get it will adjust. The people who don't will fade. Either way, you remain centered. The framework of becoming a lone wolf. Think of this journey as 3 phases. 1. Pain, the sting of being left behind, the confusion of silence, the grief of losing the familiar. 2. Refinement, the stripping down, the rebuilding, the creation of small habits, the establishment of boundaries. 3. Power, the emergence of a steady presence, leadership that doesn't need noise, a life built from alignment instead of attention. Right now, if you're in the middle, it might feel endless. But remember, refinement is the bridge. You don't stay stripped down forever. You're rebuilding something sturdier than before. Practical drill, the solitude schedule. Here's a practice that helps. Create what I call a solitude schedule. It's simple. Pick specific windows of time each week where you intentionally spend time alone. Not scrolling, not numbing, just being with yourself. It could be a morning walk without headphones, an hour in a cafe with only a journal, a quiet evening where you cook without distractions. By scheduling solitude, you teach your nervous system that being alone isn't danger, it's nourishment. Over time, the craving for constant company fades, and the comfort with your own presence grows. Choosing standards over fear. This is also the stage where you start making choices from standards, not fear. Fear says, if I set this boundary, I'll lose people. Standards say, if they can't honor this boundary, they were never mine to keep. Fear says, if I walk away, I'll be alone forever. Standards say, I'd rather be alone than with people who dishonor me. That shift, that reorientation from fear to standards, is the essence of the lone wolf path. It's what separates wandering aimlessly from walking with clarity. The risk of regression. Of course, the temptation to go back will come. When the silence feels heavy, when old circles invite you back, when nostalgia whispers that it would be easier to fit in again, you'll feel the pull. And this is the test. Do you return to the smaller version of yourself just to fill the gap? Or do you keep walking forward even when it feels uncertain? This is where strength is forged. Not in the obvious victories, but in the quiet decisions no one sees. The mornings you get out of bed when it would be easier to stay under the covers. The nights you don't text back even when loneliness begs you to. The days you keep walking when no one's clapping. Those choices, invisible as they seem, are the proof. They are the foundation of the new life you're building. So here's the truth. Being a lone wolf isn't about bitterness. It's not about proving people wrong or showing off your silence. It's about clarity. It's about choosing depth over distraction. And right now, if you're rebuilding quietly, it may not feel like progress. But trust this, the version of you emerging in this silence is steadier, stronger, and more real than the one who needed constant noise. The path isn't about being dramatic. It's about getting clear. It's about creating a foundation no one can take from you. This isn't punishment. This is preparation. And when the world does notice you again, when people ask where you've been, you won't need to explain. Your presence will speak for itself, not loud, not flashy, just grounded, whole, and real. Emergence, silent strength, and real leadership. By now, the silence has done its work. The noise of the old world is gone. The foundations of the new one are in place. And something begins to shift. You feel it before you can explain it. A steadiness, a calm, a strength that doesn't need to announce itself. This is the paradox of real power. The more aligned you become, the less you need to prove. The quieter you are, the louder your presence becomes. Silent strength. Most people think strength is loud. They think it looks like flexing, dominance, or being the center of attention. But the deepest strength, the kind forged in solitude, moves differently. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it doesn't chase, it simply is. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, didn't write meditations for an audience. He wrote them for himself. Quiet words in a private journal that never needed applause. Yet 2,000 years later, those words still echo. That's silent strength. And that's what you're building, not a facade, not a performance, a strength so real it doesn't need to advertise itself, the return of alpha energy. Now let's talk about this idea of alpha energy. In the past, you may have thought it meant control, dominance, always being on top. But true alpha energy isn't about overpowering others. It's about leading by example. It's the way you walk into a room without needing to be the loudest, yet people notice. It's the way you carry yourself with boundaries so firm, people instinctively respect them without you having to explain. It's not about chasing validation anymore. It's about embodying clarity. And here's the part most people miss. This kind of presence doesn't come from trying to be alpha. It comes naturally because you've done the work in silence, because you've built integrity in private. When the old world returns, here's something else that happens. The people who once left may come back. They'll notice the shift, they'll sense the steadiness, and they'll want to reconnect. But here's the difference. You're not desperate for it anymore. You're not waiting for their approval. You're not secretly hoping to be chosen again. You're already chosen by yourself. So when they return, you don't need to slam the door. You don't need to prove you're above them. You simply choose. From standards, not fear. From clarity, not longing. And often you'll realize the version of you they left behind no longer exists. Freedom beyond approval. This is the deepest freedom of the lone wolf path. You stop playing the endless game of trying to prove people wrong. You stop needing to justify your choices. You stop shrinking or performing. You reach a point where their opinion doesn't define you, not because you're cold, but because you're centered. Their approval is no longer the currency you trade for peace. Peace is something you already own. And when you live like that, you become untouchable. Not invincible in the sense of never feeling pain, but invincible in the sense that no one else controls your story. That's sovereignty, practical drill, grounding in presence. Here's a practice to anchor this stage. Every morning, take 3 minutes of stillness before you do anything else. No phone, no planning, no rushing. Just 3 minutes to breathe, to remind yourself, I don't need to chase. I don't need to prove. I am enough right here, right now. It sounds simple, but over time, this daily grounding becomes the foundation for everything. It's how you carry silent strength into every part of your life. Leadership redefined. Real leadership isn't about position or followers. It's about presence. It's about living your truth so consistently that people trust you without you asking. You don't have to convince. You don't have to argue. You simply live aligned, and that alignment speaks louder than any speech. And slowly, people begin to notice. They see your steadiness, your clarity, your refusal to compromise your integrity. And without you trying, you become the example. Not because you wanted to be, but because you became who you were meant to be. So this is the path. It starts with silence that feels like abandonment. It moves through the stripping down, the rebuilding, the refinement, and it ends here with emergence. Not loud, not desperate, not dramatic, just steady, just real. You become the lone wolf who returns, not to destroy, but to illuminate, not to demand attention, but to embody truth. And that truth is enough to change everything. So if you're in the silence right now, wondering when it ends, trust this: the silence isn't the end. It's the preparation. And the version of you being shaped in this quiet will walk out not weaker, not forgotten, but unshakable. And that right there is the real power. Now I want to ask you, what has solitude taught you about yourself? Drop it in the comments below, because your story might be the reminder someone else desperately needs today. And if this resonated with you, share it, because there's someone out there right now sitting in silence, believing they're forgotten. And maybe your share is the moment they realize they're not alone.